in their family and in their community, then I'm all for it. The resulting piece apparently was pretty good. Before we got there, I had to agree to do something I now know I will never do again. I had to agree to let people follow me with television cameras for 3 days. From New York to Chicago to San Francisco, then they cut it down to 16 minutes. And we all know how that works. And there's something about being on all these big television programs and people are saying your name and you don't know what they're going to say next that make you pay attention. This thing, the interview I did with Barbara Walters, ran on a Friday night. Monday morning, the phone jumps off the hook. I got all these other invitations to all these other great things, and I just kept saying no, no, no. But I did take 3 phone calls. The first phone call is from a guy who says to me he wants to create a reality TV show based on homeless people and wants me to be the judge. True story. He's going to take some homeless people off the street, clean them up, give them a job, and the one that goes on to do the most with their life is going to get a $500,000 house, $100,000 in cash, and all this other great stuff put up by sponsors. I cannot repeat in public what I said to that man. But the gist of it was, homelessness is not a game. But if you think it is, I already won, so send me my money. Never heard from him again. I take one more phone call. This was interesting. Guy gets me on the phone. He's clear, concise, compelling. He says pretty much the following. I'm a producer. I'm in the movie business. I'm not the biggest name in the business, but if you come out to Hollywood and take a meeting, lost me right there. Take a meeting. What the hell does that mean? Look, I live in Chicago. I will take a train, take a bus, take a break. I ain't gonna take a meeting. The point I'm trying to make is, I'm not believing any of this stuff. I happen to be in Los Angeles doing my day job. I agree to go and take a meeting. And you meet all these guys, they tell you all these great stories. Then we met these 3 guys from a production company called Escape Artists. Steve Tisch, Todd Black, Jason Blumenthal. And the second we sat down with them, I knew these are the guys. I felt comfortable. It came up in the meeting. One of the guys asked me a question. It was Steve Tisch. He says to me, I understand that you said no to being on the biggest TV show in the world. Why would you do that? I couldn't think of another way to answer, so I leaned into the guy and I asked him, you ever see that movie Forrest Gump? He says, yeah, I saw that. Well, I went on to explain there was a scene in the film where Forrest Gump inadvertently stumbled into an anti-war rally. They wanted him to speak out against the Vietnam War, but somebody pulled the plug. When they jacked it back up, what you heard Forrest say is, that's all I got to say about that. That's how I felt. That's all I got to say about that. Wrap the meeting up, get in the elevator. The guy who had set the meeting up looks at me and says, Chris, by the way, Steve Tisch produced Forrest Gump. Hey, I didn't know. You think about that for a second. Forrest Gump won 6 Oscars, was the 3rd highest grossing film in history, and I'm asking the man, had he seen his own movie? That's what got the deal done right there. Will Smith's name came up. I was totally not feeling it. Totally not. I remember sitting, talking with my children. I'm explaining, but Will Smith, we think big blockbuster outer space. This story's about inner space, not outer space. It was my daughter who broke it down for me when she says, Papa, look, don't worry. If he can play Muhammad Ali, he can play you. I was crushed. How do you become homeless? I like to talk about that, especially in light of things we've seen happen in America and too many other places around the world the last 3 years, last 4 years. How do you become homeless? We have, in fact, in America seen the creation of a whole new class of homeless people, something that I call white-collar homeless. Went to school, worked hard, played by the rules, and the world changed. In my case, was it drugs? No. Was it alcohol? No. There's something just as lethal as both of them. It's called life. Life happens. As a young guy, 23 years of age, I had the opportunity of a lifetime. I had a chance to go to work for and become the protege of one of the top young heart surgeons in the world. His name is Dr. Robert Ellis. We both met while we were in the military. I was in the U.S. Navy. Dr. Ellis had been trained by two pioneers in cardiac surgery, Dr. Denton Cooley and Dr. Michael D. Bakey at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas. So for me, to have the opportunity to go to work for someone of that caliber in science and medicine was huge. I was 23 years old, single, no children. I had a chance to move to San Francisco, California. I took the job for $7,500 a year. Dr. Ellis and I worked together for 4 years. We co-authored and published numerous articles in major scientific journals. About this time, I met, fell in love with, moved in with, and had a child with this beautiful woman who had just graduated from the University of California Dental School. And becoming a parent for me was the most important, precious, and loving thing I'd ever been a part of in my life. I was one of those little boys who grew up without a father. And not just without a father, but with a stepfather who was fond of reminding me every day, I ain't your daddy. You ain't got no daddy. Sometimes he put a 12-gauge shotgun right here just to make his point. I didn't know what a commitment was, but I knew what a promise was. And I promised myself as a 5-year-old boy, when I grow up, become a man, and have children, my children are going to know who their father is. So when I became a father, this wasn't just some biological extension of the bloodline. There was a whole lot of stuff came with that. I had worked my way up to the top of the pay scale at the university. I'm now making $17,500 a year. My ex had not passed the boards. She could not practice dentistry. We got a baby. We're a family. I had to forget about a possible career in science. I had to forget about maybe becoming a physician. I got to take care of a family. I got a real job. I went into sales. The computer industry was in its infancy 40 miles south of San Francisco, down on the peninsula. We moved across the bay to Berkeley, California to save money. It meant a nightmare of a commute, but you do what you got to do. But I was now making $25,000 a year. And I thought, man, we're going to be okay. Big guys in the business that I was in at that time, big guys in that business made $80,000 a year. I will never forget the company's top salesman. He made $80,000 a year, and he used to walk like he was the prize peacock. And I remember thinking, man, 80 grand, I want to walk like that. But one day, I happened to be at one of my accounts, San Francisco General Hospital, where there's never any place to park. And I see something that's the beginning of my life changing, I don't even know it. I see a guy that is absolutely the sharpest guy I've ever seen in my life. No flash, no bling, just sharp. And he's driving this gorgeous red Ferrari, slowly circling the parking lot looking for some place to park. I go over to the guy and I say, hey man, I'm coming out. You can have my parking place, but I gotta ask you 2 questions. The 2 questions were, what do you do and how do you do that? Turns out this guy's a stockbroker. And not just a stockbroker, he's one of the top institutional salespeople on Wall Street, and he makes $80,000 a month. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in this room, but I'm pretty good with some numbers, man. And I figured that out. One guy's walking around like the NBC peacock, the other guy was rolling like a rock star. I knew what I wanted to do. I started spending a lot of time with this guy in his office in downtown San Francisco, learning what a stockbroker does, when I was supposed to be 40 miles away selling scientific equipment. A couple of things happened simultaneously. Number one, I began to accumulate a huge amount of parking tickets. Double parking, illegal parking, late to feed a meter. Number two, every place I went to interview, I heard the same word. No. No, no, no. From my ex at home, I heard a couple of other words. I remember them also. I believe they were delusional and unrealistic. She had a point. Major Wall Street firms have begun to require an MBA just to get into their institutional training programs. I had never gone to college. Didn't mean I wasn't smart, didn't mean I wasn't bright, I just didn't have a college degree. But I kept coming back. And I interviewed for a year. I've been asked many times, you interviewed for a year to get a trainee slot with no guarantee. Do you think it was racism? No, absolutely not. There's another ism, something called placism. Think about it. I had never gone to college, did not come from a politically connected family, had no money of my own to invest in the stock market. Who's going to do business with you? That's placism. That could affect anybody in this room. But I kept coming back. And I kept coming back for 1 year for one reason. My mother. I had one of those old-fashioned mothers who taught me from the very beginning that I could do or be anything I wanted to do or be. Apparently, I took it too far. I made up my mind, my first ambition in life, I made up my mind I was going to become Miles Davis. Mama said I could be anybody, I chose Miles. I studied music, music theory. I played trumpet for 9 years. I got pretty good. And when I say I wanted to become Miles Davis, man, I had it bad. I had it so bad that as a little boy, people would ask me, what you gonna be when you grow up? I had it so bad, I started talking like Miles, and I'd tell them, I'm gonna be Miles Davis. Thank God my mother heard me say it one time. Mama heard me say it, she said, son, we need to talk. We sat down at the kitchen table, she explained to me, she says, baby, you're pretty good at that thing, but you can't be Miles Davis. Ain't but one, and he got that job. And when your mom put it to you like that, you gotta feel that. And I had to look at the facts. The facts were, at 18 years of age, Miles Davis was in New York City playing with Quincy Jones and Dizzy Gillespie. At the same age, I was playing with some boys named Pookie and Ray Ray. We were good, but it wasn't gonna happen. But the point is, another key decision was made as a young guy, and that decision was, I'm gonna become world-class at something. I just gotta find that one thing that turns me on as much as the music did. And the very first time that I walked into a Wall Street trading room, I knew, whoa, man, this is it. The ticket tape is rolling, the phones are ringing off the hook, people are screaming and shouting out orders, bodies are flying all over the place, tickets are getting stamped, and what looked like chaos to anybody else, for me it was like I was reading a sheet of music and I could feel it, and I knew this is where I'm supposed to be. I wore one branch manager down to the point that he says to me, Gardner, based on persistence alone, we're gonna give you a shot. Man, I quit my job. I will admit I was a little cavalier about how I did it. As a sales rep for a distributor, I had this big box of stuff I had to carry everywhere I went. Free giveaways for our customers, Petri dishes, tissue slides, latex gloves, that kind of thing. If my old boss was here, he would tell you I threw the box at him. That is not true. I will compromise and say it fell abruptly. And I said, I quit. I'm out of here. I'm going to Wall Street. I went home and I told my ex, you said I couldn't do it, but guess what? I started in 2 weeks. I was pretty pumped up. All the way up to the point, I show up on the appointed day and time only to find out that the man who had made me the offer had been fired the previous Friday. Nobody else knew who I was, why I was there, and did not care. Now, in the state of California, when you quit a job, that means no unemployment benefits, no health care, no cash flow, nothing. And worse than that, now I've got to go home and tell this woman that I don't have a job. If you don't remember anything else I say here today, remember this. Unemployment will not help your relationship. Somebody in here know what I'm talking about. Think about it. We're a young family. She's a doctor who hasn't passed the boards. She can't practice. We got a baby. I'm the breadwinner, and I have quit my job thinking I'm going to Wall Street. Whew, man, things got tough at home. I still had one shot to be in the business I've now been in for 30 years. But before I can play it all the way out, I still got to take care of my family, which means I did everything legal that I could to take care of my family and still pursue my dreams. I cut grass, hauled rubbish, cleaned basements. I learned roofing, I learned painting. I did everything that I could to take care of my family and still pursue my dream. Things are tough at home. Had a situation come up, probably never happened to anybody else in this room but me. Had one of those arguments with my ex about nothing that only ended because we both fell asleep. We woke up in the morning, everybody's feet hit the floor. Guess what? We went at it again. The neighbors have heard enough of this. They don't know what's happening, what might happen, what could happen. They called the police. The police come, they want to make sure everything is fine. Take her over here, calm her down, talk to her. Take me outside, calm me down, talk to me. And then one of my local police officers, just doing his job, says, "You mind if I search your car?" "No, sir, go ahead." Searches the car, nothing. Then again, just doing his job, says, "Well, let me just run this license plate through a computer." That was it. With interest and penalties, I had accumulated $1,200 in unpaid parking tickets trying to interview in downtown San Francisco the previous year. Double parking, illegal parking, late to feed a meter. An honest question could be, you knew you had the tickets, why didn't you pay them? Well, the position I was now in, having to cut grass to put food on the table, every dollar that came to the door, I had to make a decision. I could pay the tickets or I could pay the rent. I did probably what every man in this room would have done. I paid the rent. I was taken to jail. First, last, only time in my life. Arrested, taken to jail, put in a jail cell with a murderer, a rapist, and an arsonist. And I'm in here on parking tickets. First thing you learn in jail. First thing I learned. Everybody's got to tell their little jailhouse story. Well, why are you in here? The first thing that I learned, according to the inmates, nobody did it. It's all a setup or circumstantial evidence. They asked me, well, why are you in here? And I told them, I'm in here for attempted murder, and I will try it again. I wasn't going to say I'm in here on no parking ticket. It's like it's a chain of command had to get established. And to show you how a bad day can get worse, all of this happens on a Friday. Now, I don't know how things work here, but in America, hey, that means no court until Monday, which means we can't hold you in this friendly little downtown Berkeley jail. We need this for our regular weekend customers. I was sent to a place called Santa Rita State Penitentiary, where the most notorious inmate had chopped 23 people to death with an axe. And I'm up here on parking tickets. 10 days. And I'm going to say this because I know somebody is sitting out there thinking about it. You know what? If y'all got some parking tickets, you need to get up and walk out of here right now. 10 days. And the hardest part of this whole ordeal, this was the first time I'd ever been away from my son. I was the first thing that boy saw when he came in the world. I was the first thing he saw every morning, the last thing he saw every night. And if you've never been forcefully separated from your child, that's an experience that I will pray you never have. All I could think about for 10 days, does my son know I didn't leave him like my father left me? Does my son know I can't be there because of these circumstances? What's my ex say when my little boy looks at her and says, "Where's Papa?" That's all I could think about for 10 days. It was making me crazy. But I had one more pressing issue. The last interview that I had to absolutely ace to get into the business that, again, I've been in now for 30 years, the last interview was set up one day before I'm to be released from prison. And then something happened. And nothing will ever convince me it was anything other than the hand of God. There was a prison guard and there was a telephone. And I said to that guard, I've been pursuing a dream for a year. I got a chance to go to work at one of the finest firms in the industry. I need to reschedule this one interview. Will you please let me make this one phone call? Now, I've got my one constitutional call 10 days earlier. Not a second's hesitation. The guy dials the number, hands me the handset behind the bars. The conversation is brief and to the point. "Mr. Costello, hey, it's Chris Gardner. Something has come up. Can I reschedule?" "Fine, done. Set it up day after tomorrow. Release from prison, interest and penalties forgiven." And then I did something. You ever know something in your gut nobody had to tell you? I went to the place we used to call home, Berkeley, California, and I looked through the window, and I knew they were gone. This woman took everything but the dust. Most importantly, she took my little boy. I still went on the job interview. Now, in the movie, you saw Will Smith show up wearing blue jeans with paint all over him. I wasn't just wearing blue jeans, I was wearing bell-bottom blue jeans. I was wearing bell-bottom blue jeans and a motorcycle jacket. And I show up at this man's office at 6:30 in the morning, and he says exactly what I would say to anybody who shows up at my front door dressed like that at 6:30 in the morning. "Delivery's in the rear." I would have said the same thing, but I come right back at him and I explain, "Mr. Costello, I'm Chris Gardner. Today's the biggest day of my business career. I must admit I'm underdressed for the occasion." So, "Yeah, you got that right. What happened?" I could not think of a lie bizarre enough. I told the truth. It was the best thing I could have done. Turns out the man I'm talking to had been married and divorced 3 times. He started telling me stories about his ex-wives. That second one, I don't know why he ever got married again. And out of nowhere he says, "You be here tomorrow morning, I will personally walk into the trading room. Beautiful, I'm hired, I'm getting my shot. My salary, $1,000 a month gross. My days as a trainee were the same as they were for anybody else, but first I had to do something. I had to find a place to live. I moved into a boarding house, Oakland, California, 3 meals a day and a room. My days as a trainee, the same as they were for anyone who ever started on the bottom of Wall Street or in any major sales organization. You do the one thing that no one else wants to do and everyone else thinks is beneath them, which is cold call. Turn myself into a cold call machine 200 times a day with a rotary dial phone. I don't know if you guys in the back can see this, but in the front, see how this one finger is cockeyed? That's my calling finger. 200 times a day. And at night, the pain. When will I see my son? How much longer is this going to go on? My ex and I were in that unfortunate space where sometimes both of the adults start acting like children. And one parent feels like if the only way I can hurt you is to hit you over the head with a baby, I'll do it. My ex also began a little campaign of what I can now call emotional terrorism. Will call me on the phone and let me hear my little boy scream and cry and hang up the phone. Now this is before technology and all these other kind of fancy things you can do with a phone. But I know this, somebody else in here probably would agree with me. There could be a room full of a dozen babies crying and you know if that's your baby or not. Put it out of my mind. Study, study, study. Pass my exam. Higher score in the class. Big deal. My reward, I get to come back the next day and make 200 phone calls. Goes on for months. And one night, 1 o'clock in the morning, there's a knock at the door. You know who that is. It's my ex. And the conversation is brief and to the point. I can't do this anymore here. And left my son with me. Just like that, that's how we became homeless. The boarding house did not allow children. My son and I were instantly evicted. We joined a class of people invisible in America. It is estimated that 21% of all the homeless people in America have jobs and go to work every day. In some communities, that number is as high as 32%, working families homeless. I'm not talking about the guys outside with the cups. You never saw us because we were at work. Before we began feeling pursuit of happiness, it was very important to Will Smith and I that he see, smell, and touch places my son and I had to live for a year. Wow. To his credit, biggest movie star in the world could not go any place without a 4-man security detail. He says, no, it's me and you. Let's go for a walk. 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, through the streets of San Francisco. The first place I took him was down into the subway system. And he's such a bright guy, the first thing he said to me, a lot of these people look like they're dressed to go someplace. Yeah, where a lot of them were dressed to get up, go to work in the morning. My son and I, again, instantly evicted. We did the only thing that we could do. We moved into a series of hotels. $25 a day in a color TV. Do the math. You're making $1,000 a month gross. It won't work. We moved downstream. $10 a day in a black and white TV. Imagine who's living next door to you and your baby for $10 a day. That's a different world. It won't work. My son and I have begun to go to church every day. Glide Memorial Church, Reverend Cecil Williams. Food for the soul. But just as importantly was food. Because in the basement of that church is something called Moe's Kitchen, where they served at that time 1 million meals a year to people who were in need. My son and I were in need. We eat more than our share, especially my son. My son today, 6 feet 8 inches tall, weighs 350 pounds. That all started in the basement of that church. I tell the Reverend every time I see him, you ought to let folks know what could happen to their kids. This year, October, we're going to celebrate 50 years of his service to that church. 50 years. And he let me know a few years ago, he told me at this point in time, he had never seen a man standing in the food line with a baby. He's seen women with children, he'd never seen a man. And he'd come up to me every day and ask me the same 2 questions. What you doing with that baby? It's my baby. But what you gonna do with it? I'm gonna keep it. I've been asked many, many times, why didn't you give the baby to your mother? Well, you know what? That was not my mother's baby. That was my baby. And I made that promise to myself as a 5-year-old boy. When I grow up, become a man, and have children, my children are going to know who their father is. So sometimes in your life, you get a chance to walk the walk. This was mine. There were many days I did not know where the next step was taking us to. I did not know where the next meal was coming from, but I knew this, we were going to be together. The Reverend started the first homeless hotel in America. 2 blocks away from Neiman Marcus, 2 blocks away from Gucci in downtown San Francisco, is the beginning of one of the worst ghettos in the country. It's called the Tenderloin. He started this program for homeless women with children. But he said to me, you know what? I see something. Y'all homeless, but you're not hopeless. Y'all gonna stay here with us. Here's the deal at the homeless hotel. You gotta be out by 8 a.m. You cannot come in before 6 p.m. You're going to work or you're going to look for work. When you leave the room, take everything in the room that's yours with you. It's first come, first serve. No guarantee there'll be a room here when you come back. Many nights there weren't. Every day for a year, you would see me, my son, his stroller, a duffel bag with all his clothes in them, my briefcase, the biggest bag of Pampers in the world, 1 suit on my back, 1 suit in the hanging bag, and we hit it. Every day for a year. And I did say diapers. Major difference between reality and the film. In the film, Jaden Smith plays my son as a 5-year-old. They did that for the dialogue. My son was 14 months old. That changes everything. I had 2 suits. I had to wear one or the other one every day for a year. 2 suits, 1 blue, 1 gray. The joke around the office started, oh, that's Chris Gardner, and he's reenacting the American Civil War. Some days he's with the North, some days he's with the South. It's funny now, that shit wasn't funny at the time. I promised myself, one day it's gonna be different. All that running, you saw Will Smith doing the movie, all that running was real. Think about it. I'm working commission-only sales, and I know, if I stay on this phone another 5 minutes, I probably can get this commission. But if I stay on the phone another 5 minutes, I'm gonna miss the bus. And if I miss the bus, I'm late to the center. If I'm late to the center, I'm late to the shelter. If I'm late to the shelter, there are no more rooms. Being a young father, committed to breaking the cycle of men who were not there for their children, there were days I chose to stay on that phone. And that meant we slept wherever we could, which included train stations, bus terminals, hotel lobbies, public libraries, outside in the park if the weather permitted, airports. This was pre-9/11. The big airports in America were open 24 hours. There was nothing unusual about seeing a man, a baby, and a whole bunch of bags. My one residual hang-up that I have from this experience and time in my life, I got this thing about bags. I got a room in my house with nothing but bags in it. If it doesn't have a hole in it, if you can tie a knot in it, that's a good bag. The one thing my son remembers, and it was Oprah. When we finally did her show, she asked him, what's the one thing you remember about this time in your life? And what he said made my soul smile. What he said was, all I remember is every time I looked up, my father was there. He didn't know we were homeless. He did not need to know. He did not know that some of the times he ate and I didn't, it wasn't because I wasn't hungry. He didn't need to know that. He did not know that some of the times we both ate and got a hotel room, that was only made possible because I had just sold blood. He didn't need to know that. And I say he did not need to know that because that's what fathers do. And the truth of the matter is sometimes the best father is a good mama, any place on the planet. He did not need to know. If you ever see the movie again, they do it very, very subtly. The little boy is eating, but the father's napkin, knife, fork, spoon had not been touched. He didn't need to know. There were times, honestly, I let my son spend the night with friends. They had children, they loved them, but I also knew they were going to eat that night. I didn't have money to feed them. I slept under my desk in the office. I get up in the morning, put on a blue suit, a gray suit, and I make those 200 phone calls. When there was no place else to go, there was a bathroom in a train station in Oakland, California. And it worked for us for two reasons. It was clean and you could lock the door. Though in the movie you saw Will and the son play this game about being cavemen. We need to find a cave, someplace to spend the night. I had a game I played with my son. The game was real simple. The game was called Shh. And that meant that no matter what anybody said on the other side of that door, no matter how hard they pound on the door, we're not here. We're invisible. We lived like that for a year. It took me that long to save the money, $20 at a time, to get a place for us to call home. Even after I had saved the money, I would show up to rent properties, and some people wouldn't rent to us. They make judgments on us. The first thing they'd ask is, where's the baby's mother? Well, what happened? Well, what's that got to do with anything? I'm gainfully employed, I got good credit, I got the references, and I got the cash right here. They wouldn't rent to us. One of my favorite parts of the book, The Pursuit of Happiness, is the story of my son and I getting our first place to live after being on the streets for a year. I remember it like it was this morning. I got my son in the stroller. I've got the stroller covered up with plastic bags from the cleaners. It's cold, it's wet, it's winter time. I don't want him to get sick. And I saw a house that was no different from any other house in the neighborhood, but with one exception. There was a rose bush. And I had never seen roses in the ghetto in my life. And I remember thinking, man, this is the most beautiful place in the world. I went over and started talking to this little old man who was outside, and it turned out he owned the property. Told him where we've been and what we've been through, and he cuts me off. He says, son, you ain't got to tell me nothing else. Y'all can move in here. We moved in. Slept on the floor our first night. And this is just one of the ways that issues become generational for children. My son has seen me carry everything we own, everywhere we went, every day for a year. It had become normal for him. But on this day, we get up to walk out of the house and I'm not carrying anything. My little boy gets upset. He says, Papa, you forgot this. We had to bring our stuff. I don't know the words to convey to you what it feels like to be able to say to your son, well, you know what, son? We got a key now. We home. We don't have to carry stuff anymore. I don't know the words to convey the lightness of that to you. The only way I could convey that to you would be if I could levitate myself off the stage. I remember this. We both skipped to the train that day. That was a good day. And it's funny how life can be sometimes. This train station, 2 blocks from our new home, the same train station we used to have to sleep in. Something else very important started to happen at this train station. They began to open a daycare center, a child care center, a place called Happiness, and they did spell it with a Y. And what made that so important for me is right now, I got a 3-hour commute on a bus and a train just to get to the one place I'm comfortable leaving my child. 3 hours on the bus or 2 blocks down the street. The challenge was the daycare center would not take children who were not potty trained. Man, we went to potty train boot camp. That's a major quality of life issue, is it not? 3 hours on the bus or 2 blocks down the street. And I told my son, I said, no, son, let's just sit here and talk a while. We're going to sit here till something happens. As we were set up now, we didn't get home till 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And what that meant in my own neighborhood in Oakland, California, that meant that the ladies of the evening had begun their shifts. And for months, these ladies of the evening saw me, this baby, and a stroller. They never saw a woman. They knew something's different, something ain't right. They started trying to give them candy. And I said, no ma'am, no thank you. I didn't let him have sugar until he was 4 years old. But one day, they started to give him $5 bills. And I will tell you, were it not for those ladies of the evening giving that baby that $5 bill, there were days I could not have fed him. So till this day, hey, the ladies of the evening are all right with me. I ain't got nothing but love for them. That don't mean I do business with them. Don't look at me like that. That's not what I'm saying. But you think about that for a second. We didn't have a term to describe something of that nature then. I now know that would qualify. You could call that a random act of kindness. We see y'all out here. We know you're struggling. We don't know what the situation is, and we don't care. Here's $5. Go feed your baby. That was the beginning of us turning our lives around. That, 200 phone calls a day and a few friends. Got in touch with some friends who hadn't heard from us in a while, and they all were saying some form of the same thing. How can we help you? In my case, friends saying to us, hey man, look, we got an extra bed in the basement. Nobody's using it. You guys come get it. You can have it. We got a card table in the garage. We don't play out there anymore. Why don't you put that in the kitchen? That could be your kitchen set. Y'all come get this stuff. We go get the stuff. We didn't have a car. Now, I don't know Singapore well, but in America, there are some communities where they're the shopping carts from the grocery stores. They kind of get reappropriated to the community. So that became our car. Normally, you go outside 2 blocks in any direction, and you go find one of these carts. We go get the cart, we go pick up the stuff. We're all one day walking, looking for the cart. The little boy figures we had walked far enough. He stopped dead in his tracks, and he says to me, Papa, where you parked the car? He didn't know, and he didn't need to know. We're in the car one day rolling up the street, man, it starts to rain. We're both drenched. My son looks up at me, he says, Papa, one day, can we get a car with a top on it? He didn't know, and he didn't need to know. And I keep making these 200 phone calls. And I think I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay. I'm building this little book of business. I'm making these 200 phone calls a day. But one day, you ever have something happen that wasn't the worst thing? It just happened at the worst possible time. I got home one day only to find out that my local utility couldn't wait another day to get that $19 I owed them and turn my lights off. Shut off my electricity. I didn't know whether I was going to quit, crack, or crack. After a year of the most intense struggle of my life, I began to doubt myself for the very first time. I had to wash my son by candlelight. And I'm washing this baby, and I'm asking myself these doubting questions for the would happen. We worked in a big bullpen. Everybody can see what everybody else is doing. Every day around noon, the same little old man came in to see this gorgeous female broker who sat next to me. None of my business. I'm sitting there wearing a blue suit, a gray suit, and I'm making these 200 phone calls. This guy watches me for a year. And one day he comes over to me and he says, "What are you doing here? You don't belong here. Here's my card. Come see me." Thinking it's a potential client, I go see this guy. Wrong. This little old man was the managing general partner for Bear Stearns in San Francisco, and he was coming to see his girlfriend. Oh. I don't want to get distracted, but I do have to share this with you. For me, to see what happened to that firm, Bear Stearns, man, that was like watching the house you grew up in burn, and ain't nothing you could do about it. We've all heard the stories. The CEO lost $1 billion. Some other investor lost $1 billion. So what? What about the people who lost everything? What about the people who worked at that company 25, 30 years, had their stock put away thinking they got their retirement taken care of, and they wake up one day and find out it's worthless? What about those people? And I'm telling you, now you're 55, 57 years old, you got to come out and find a job in an industry and a global economy that's severely contracting, not expanding. What about those people? There's going to be a cost here in human capital that's incalculable. But I go see this guy, and he tells me the history of the firm, and he tells me how the firm was built by entrepreneurs with a strong work ethic. And he says to me, "I've seen your work, and if you come over here, I will make you a star." Then he asked me a question. "What do you need to be here?" I had to figure that out. What's he asking me? He was asking me my salary requirements. No one had ever asked me that before. I had been making it on $1,000 a month gross. I said the biggest, most obscene number that would come out of my mouth, which at that time was $5,000. Done. $5,000 a month, 50% commissions, guaranteed for a year. By the way, here's 1 month's advance. Go buy yourself some new clothes. I went out and bought my first 2 pinstripe suits. One blue, one gray. I went to work with some boys named Weinberg, Feinberg, and Steinberg. They started calling me Gardner. Old man Weinberg comes up to my desk the very first day. "So you want to learn this business?" "Yes, sir, I want to learn this business." "Well, dress British and think Yiddish." What the hell did that mean? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. Very first day, very first phone call, I get this call from a Mr. Greenberg. I don't know Mr. Greenberg, but everybody else in the room did. They make it real clear. Take the call. "Chris, this is Ace, and I want you to know, Bear Stearns was not built by people with MBAs. Bear Stearns was built by people with PhDs. Now we're glad you're here. Get to work." Click. Whoa, who was that? That was Alan Ace Greenberg, Chairman, CEO, Senior Partner, Bear Stearns. What's a PhD? Poor, smart, with a deep desire to become wealthy. Man, I had found the promised land. It wasn't going to get no better than this. It made sense to us. Let's call people that we know have a whole lot of money. Little town in Texas called Midland, Texas. Midland, Texas has more millionaires due to the price of oil than any place else in the country. Let's call them up. The problem was, the boys in San Francisco could not understand what the gentlemen in Texas were saying. Now, my folks are from Louisiana, which is right next door to Texas, so that makes me like an honorary Texan. I can speak and understand fluent Texan. And they were all saying the same thing. "I'm in the Earl business. I'm in the Earl business, Bo." He He's saying he's in the oil business. Let me talk to him. None of them had